Hi everyone, this is Nick Dressler and I am going to talk about pre-assessment today. A lot of times in school we look at the objective test or essay as the end of our unit. The thing that we're building up to is the test, and that summative assessment is the thing that becomes the marker for learning and determines most of the grade or a large chunk of the grade for the student, this one-time assessment kind of at the end of the unit. Now, by that logic, what that means is that is the important part of the learning would be to sort of build up to get to that area. And we've all had instances where when that happens, the students tend to quote unquote learn or kind of memorize the stuff that's maybe on our review sheet in order to take that test, score well on the test, and then sort of forget that information. Now, the way that we tend to then make them recall that information is to maybe have a cumulative test or say that this is going to be back on a test later. In the second semester, we're going to have tests and material from the first semester we covered, et cetera, et cetera. And while that might work, while they're within the walls of our classroom, and while we are their teacher, the second that we go away, the incentive for that learning goes away as well. The second that those tests go away and those grades go away, the ability to recall the information or the point of recalling the information goes away as well. And so we almost turn them into kind of Pavlov's dogs, where the Pavlov's dogs drool now because of the bell and not because of the food. The grades and the way that we have our unit set up can make it so the students perform and their motivation is to do well on the test and not necessarily to incorporate these skills into authentic life environments, not to help them in their life, not to become better citizens, better human beings, better Catholics, but to get a 91. Okay, and once the 91 has happened or whatever, 97, 98, they turn off, and that the motivation isn't there the same way it used to be. Now, I'm not saying that that's intentional. I'm not saying that it is anything the student does on purpose, or that it is absolutely impossible for a student to maintain motivation. I'm talking in general about students as a kind of archetype. So obviously there are people that aren't like this. There are students that aren't like this, but the majority of students, this happens whether or not they want it to. The motivation becomes doing well on that thing. So what I propose instead is to have something like this, whereby the end of the unit, the thing that the students are going for is sort of some sort of collaborative, differentiated assignment where based on what they've done throughout the unit, they end up doing some sort of collaborative project, some sort of real world authentic assessment with the skills that they have used during the unit itself. Now, what that means is that we take the things that we would typically have at the end of the unit and put those more toward the beginning. So the first thing we would do would be to introduce the standards that we are talking about within the unit. But once we get there in this vocabulary front loading for new standards, what we're talking about is that objective stuff that they need to know in the unit. Now, these can be equations, these can be vocabulary words, it can be terminology, it can be dates if you're in history, it can be people, whatever these things are that we tend to test on. Short answer questions, and we study for this test maybe in the beginning. Once they have done well enough on this test to pass the test, we move forward here into the formative assessments, and now based on what they've done on this test, we can differentiate these formative assessments, perhaps group these formative assessments to work on things that the students did not do as well on the test on. Now, once the students become proficient or almost proficient in these skills, they then move into this purple box. For the skills that they don't quite master, these now move down to, or don't, not even don't quite. The ones that they're not doing as well and that they're developing in move down into this box and then are recycled back up here for the next unit. Okay, and so as the students now do become proficient and almost proficient, they move into a collaborative assignment here, and then now we add in a new set of standards and we move on to the next unit. So let me give you an example of what I'd be talking about here. I teach English, so I'll do an example from what could be an English assignment. Okay, so our English unit. So now it would be more in depth than this, but let's just simplify it for the sake of going through this real Willy Wonka-ization of our curriculum here. All right, so standards. Let's say a student has a reading standard of determining the difference between the narrator and the author would be one, and then being able to find and explicate a theme within the book. All right, and let's say that the content for this unit is going to be the story Alice in Wonderland. Just making something up, first thing I thought of. All right, so we got Alice in Wonderland, we're gonna read this book, and now all of a sudden, the content, this stuff in the beginning becomes that sort of, the things that we as English teachers would typically test, sort of the, are you reading? What these are sort of the quizzes and the checkpoints here. About whether they're doing the homework, whether they're incorporating the stuff that we talk about in class. Okay, once they sort of pass this test, or perhaps even maybe write the essay kind of toward the middle end of the novel that we've been asking them to do. So like maybe half the unit is looking pretty traditional, right? Then we move into the series of formative assessments designed to help them in areas that they don't quite understand. Okay, so let's say I have my students write an essay on either the first standard that I mentioned, the difference between the narrator and the author, or the second set of standards the second standard where they find a theme within the story and write an essay where they sort of explicate that theme and elaborate on its importance. Okay, then from what they say in the essay, I now design formative assessments to help those students to do better in those standards moving forward. And once through the formative assessments and the essay, I can start to look and see that they are proficient or almost proficient in the one that they went to, then they can move here. If a student kind of doesn't quite get there, and maybe writing standards are coming into play here too. There's more than just two standards, right? Like this, there's a lot of different standards that would go into the different boxes as you move forward. But the developing ones go back here, and then we work on them again in the next unit. But as the students become proficient through our objective testing and our formative assessments, now they go into differentiated collaborative assignment. All right, so let's say from the beginning, you wrote your essay about the different themes that are in Alice in Wonderland, and then you go through formative assessments and correct some of the errors that you made here. Now you become proficient, and now in a group, say of 3 or 4 other people who did that, you are now assigned to create a podcast in which you talk about your learning of that particular skill, your learning of the writing standards that you went through with the essay, and how that relates to the standard itself, how it relates to Alice in Wonderland, and you create a podcast out of it that you're eventually going to try to get published onto iTunes or your favorite podcast downloading system. This is a real world thing. This is something that you are publishing. This is something that you are doing for a better reason than just class. You're getting a grade for it. There's still going to be a rubric attached. The teacher's still going to help you, but you're not just using the skill for the sake of the test. You're now taking the test for the sake of being allowed to do this sort of more fun real world assignment. And let me tell you, if you can flip your units to do this, by the time you get to this point, the students have a lot of vigor in their work. They're buzzing around the classroom, looking for help from this person. They need this person to come do this graphic for this website. They need this person to be a guest on their podcast, so they're walking them through these things. And then they all have different things that they're going toward based on decisions they made at the beginning of the unit. Now, it could very well be that then as they go through and go back, now the second set of standards, the students that maybe did the first one, when you go on to book number 2, now they do the opposing standard, the standard that they didn't do yet, the one that they didn't write the essay on, and the students that did the second standard now do the first one, and then you maybe take a couple short stories or another short novel and follow a similar process where now at the end they're doing a Google Lit trip, or they're doing a screencast, or they're doing an in-class presentation, or they're writing a letter to their governor, or perhaps doing some sort of service that require that, or there's a writing aspect of it, or something like that, or even to where they design their own collaborative assessment as well. And you can see, while this might sort of be confusing, at the very least, you can see that it is a cycle and that there is no end point. Okay, and so what this creates is a habit of improvement, a habit of learning for the sake of doing something well in life. And then the grade is assessing that, as opposed to learning it for the sake of doing something on the test, full stop, right? When the test is over, the learning's over, right? But here, you're using the test or, the traditional assignment to determine what they're learning moving forward. What do they need to know based on what they've done here? And then we're kind of rolling that back in and re-practicing more and more. Maybe there's another essay here the second time, and they're supposed to work on some of the standards that, maybe were in the red the first time through. And now when we write the second essay, different students are going to work on different writing standards based on what they did in Unit 1. Okay, and so it is a way to differentiate. It is a way to foster a growth mindset. It is a way to continue development, and it is a way to make sure that the students know what they're learning, know why they're learning it, and feel confident about that learning, and are essentially graded for the thing that they for the skill that we kind of said that we were going to grade them on from the beginning. And through this kind of flipping of your curriculum, you can really develop a really interesting, like I said, vigorous curriculum where the rigor takes care of itself, and you end up watching a bunch of busy bees running around the classroom and become kind of a project manager more toward the end of the unit, and really watch students take control and take authority, and watch the students take ownership of the classroom and of their own learning. Thank you.